Hello and welcome back to another episode of Transport Fever 2. We're here in Brookshire County on our Houston rail line leaving the city, and in this episode we're going to focus mainly on developing the cities across our map, which will mostly include connecting the dots with some of our rail connections and ensuring that each city has an adequate bus network connecting them to those train stations. And so the primary focus is going to be connecting Houston to Tacoma finally. This is a project we've been talking about for a while, just never really had the money to fully commit to a line like that. So that'll be our first big connection, and then our next big connection will be from Pittsburgh to Lincoln, and then also by extension we'll be throwing a line out towards Roswell and connecting that to our passenger network. And then we'll be going around to some of our larger cities like Houston here and Salt Lake City and updating their bus networks to ensure that people are getting moved where they need to and are getting there efficiently. As we can see, Salt Lake City has quite a good amount of people that aren't getting to their destinations yet, just because our buses are either too slow or this loop is a little inefficient. So we'll focus on those, and at the end of this, we should have a pretty well-developed passenger network across the map. So let's start with our Houston to Tacoma connection. As we can see here, this hill is very obviously our first obstacle, which we might just handle by turning it into one large tunnel until we pop out over on this end. I think that'll probably be our best way to go about this, unless we curve around and sort of stay in this low spot until we can rise up high enough to just have to tunnel through this short area. We'll give it a try, but I think the more optimal option will just be to blow out a huge tunnel near Tacoma. And so we can see here, trying to slowly elevate from the station up to what would pretty much be the low point in this area. Even at our maximum slope, it's still quite a good distance to get that high. And we can drag this out even further, and we're still at max height, hardly above the ground. And so I think it's just better if we throw a tunnel in like this. It'll cost quite a good bit. Looks to be around 25 million, maybe more depending on where we end up coming out. But I think what we should do is build out from Tacoma, see where this gets us near the foot of this hill, and then we'll connect our two ends that way. And that should give us a pretty streamlined connection between those two cities. And so one of our first big roadblocks is going to be figuring out how we want to tackle this connection here. I suppose what we could do is just delete this road temporarily, and we'll pause so we don't get much issue there. We can drag this road back a bit farther, and then we'll just drag this road out. We'll actually make it flat coming out so that it's level with our tracks. And so something along the lines of that. And then from here, it can rise up and then connect to this road. And so this leaves us with a pretty decent area where we can just bring these tracks straight out without completely destroying the road that was here. It looks like it gets a little bumpy for some reason. Let's see if maybe we can fix that. Alright, so now that this is all connected, we can start to leave Tacoma and figure out how we're going to snake our way over to this point. And we'll try to keep our road crossings to a minimum, since this road will probably also end up being a pretty important connection for cars and other truck traffic. But ideally we'll want to keep this pretty level coming out, since we'll have to go up or maybe we end up going down through the tunnel, but we will have to come up a little bit in elevation to here, so we don't want to do too many unnecessary height changes. Alright, so now I'm pretty happy with this run up to the mountains here. It didn't cost too much. Honestly, the landscaping around was probably a bit more costly than the track itself, but it fits in nicely with its landscape. Now all we have to do is see what this number looks like as we drag this under all of this land and connecting up over here. And so I think this as a connection isn't too bad. It is going to cost us 30 million to build this, which is unfortunate because this is a cost that I would have liked to keep on the lower end, but I think even long term, when this inevitably becomes a high-speed track, having this tunnel is pretty much just going to be set for the future of this map. So we're not really going to be deleting and rebuilding this tunnel anytime soon. So I think we'll be okay with this investment. Although it looks like changing that tunnel type did increase our cost. So I suppose we'll keep it to the standard brick for now, and then we can change the connection later on. So let's build this, 30 million. And now the second set of tracks shouldn't cost nearly quite as much, but it does look like it's still a nice 20 million for the second set of tracks. So let's build that, and we'll finally be done with that. So now that's these two cities connected, we just need to set up each end, figure out a train that we want to run here. I don't think we're going to do anything with any train hierarchy running between these cities just yet. I maybe just want to run a train between these two cities, and gauge demand first, and then we'll start to think about a high-speed train that maybe goes from Tacoma to Salt Lake City, or one that skips stations. So we'll worry about that after, but first let's get our crossing tracks here. And then we'll place down a couple of signals. And then coming into Tacoma, we'll do the same thing, except I think we'll get our switch track out here, unless maybe we could fit it in here, but it looks like that's too sharp of a curve there. So we'll just get this built right here and get our last set of signals down. And I think this should be good. So let's get a train going between these two cities, and then we'll leave this to run for a little bit, and then we'll come check back up on it. And so we're going to reuse this train depot out here. We're just going to rotate it a bit so it fits a little bit better, and our track can go the opposite way towards Tacoma, since this is the one that heads straight towards Lincoln. But we should be able to just get that placed, and now we have an option for a train to get sent out towards Tacoma. Alright, and so this is the train that we're going to use to test run this connection. It's going to be a 442 Atlantic with a high speed of 62, which is currently the highest speed we can get out of an engine. We chose this one because we don't necessarily need power or tractive effort, since this is a pretty flat line, so we can keep our running costs fairly low. And then we have 6 of these 6-axle passenger cars, which gives us a capacity of 120, and we have some room to add a few more cars on the end without completely destroying the train's performance. So we'll start off with this. We'll set up this line running from Tacoma over to Houston, and then we will just let this line run for a bit. Alright, and here's this train as it comes into Tacoma, where it will do its first stop. I don't think it's going to pick up anyone on the first stop, but this will just be to establish the connection, and we'll make sure it has no issues before we move on to our next project. Alright, so our next connection, as I mentioned before, will be from Pittsburgh to Lincoln, and of course that's going to come from this Pittsburgh station, and we'll pretty much follow the river as best we can. We might have to cut through here just so that we don't lose a bunch of speed curving around this hill, and then once we get to here, we'll have to sort of figure out a way to slowly slope up to this height, where then we can just basically cut across this huge open area until we get to here, which I think is probably the best point to cross over to get towards Lincoln, since if we go around this way, it gets pretty hilly coming into our forest area, and then any other spot would just require a ton of money in order to tunnel through. Although I think we might actually have an option to, instead of cutting this corner, we can come through here, follow this low spot, only have to tunnel through this portion, and then maybe figure out a way to work our way down, and that would give us a more even connection where we can go to either towards Lincoln or Pittsburgh, depending on how we want to run that. But I think we'll go with this, and then we'll have to split off a line to head towards Roswell, which we also might loop back around and head in towards Lincoln at some point. And so let's start this off here in Pittsburgh, where we're going to have our trains come out, and we're going to add a slight curve coming out of this station to mirror the road, just so we can get a consistent depth for all of the buildings here. We won't have to worry about cutting off buildings or anything like that. And so I think something more along the lines of this works out pretty well. You can see we can still have decent depth buildings in here, but the train doesn't necessarily cut off everything. So now that we're outside of the city, out this way, we can really just focus on heading out and getting to our destinations. Alright, so now we have our connection between Pittsburgh, Lincoln, and Tacoma done. This area was probably the most tricky, dealing with the elevation change for all these connections, but I think our solution works out pretty well. We had to do a lot of landscaping to make it look a little more natural, but I think that works. We ended up tunneling through here, and then through all of this with a little bit of a bridge. I'm sure that'll provide a nice view from the train looking out over this way. And then this fairly long tunnel underground to this point, which then we tunnel again all the way back into the city of Pittsburgh. So let's quickly come through and smooth up some of this landscaping, and then after we're done with this, I think we can, I guess we'll make two new connections, one as a direct line from Pittsburgh to Lincoln, and then another as a direct line from Pittsburgh to Tacoma. Alright, so this is the train that we'll be using. It is a very similar setup as we've done for the previous line, the Fort Route to Atlantic with the 6-axle passenger cars behind it. We'll keep this at 80 capacity for now, and we'll do one of these for each line. So we'll have one from Pittsburgh to Tacoma, and then we'll set up another one from Pittsburgh to Lincoln in just a moment. But actually first, before we do that, I forgot we need to set up our signals on our new tracks so that we don't run into any issues there. I believe it looks like this train might have already been out, so we'll flip this around. Hopefully that won't cause any issues, but I believe that's this part good. We'll need to set up some more signals over here. And then in order to fix this, we just need to allow these to cross, I believe. So hopefully once we do this, that warning goes away. But we'll finish up our signals, and then we can finish up adding our trains across the other lines. Alright, so now that both of those lines are set up, we have one of our trains up here in Pittsburgh just pick up its first load of people. This is our Lincoln line, and then our one to Tacoma, I believe, is right here. This one also has only 2 people, so that should increase, as it looks like we're getting a few people on the Tacoma end popping up here. But obviously, let's take a look at our previous train here and see how this one's doing. And so taking a look here, it looks like this train is doing very well for us. As just one train, it's doing pretty good. It looks like the demand coming from Houston isn't too great. Although there is 24 people already waiting. This train already has 48, and Tacoma actually has over 400 people waiting here to go to Houston. And that's actually going to start impacting our other lines, as it's going to fill up this, and it's going to overcrowd our bus stations with people that would rather go to Houston than people that would rather go to Lincoln or Pittsburgh. And so anyway, I think we added one more building to our Tacoma station, but I think this is going to need to be upgraded with a much bigger building, or much bigger station buildings in the near future. But I think it's safe to say that we could probably just duplicate this train, and we'll have 2 running on this line. That should keep up with the demand, at least coming from Tacoma, as we now have over 400 people waiting. So hopefully this train keeps up. We don't want it to impact our other lines. It looks like everything over here is doing just fine. This train is doing very well. I'm curious to see if it's doing any better now that it's connected to Tacoma, if maybe we're getting more people from Salt Lake City, or even all the way from Portland wanting to head all the way out there. It looks like we do have a decent amount of people waiting in Portland, so maybe there's room for us to start thinking about maybe getting a bigger, better train on this line. But we'll let this sit for a bit longer before we end up making that call. And then I did say that I wanted to get a passenger train out to Roswell, but I think we're going to hold off on that after seeing how our Houston to Tacoma line has affected the cities, and we're going to change focus to switching up the bus networks in each city, making sure each city that's connected to this sort of main line now has adequate bus access across the whole city, and make sure it's efficient as well. So let's switch gears to that. And I think this doesn't seem to be a bus issue here in Tacoma. I think it's just full on demand, but I know Houston definitely needs some upgrades here. So let's start here in Houston and see what we can do. Alright, so first, I think this train station needs a much larger and more spacious bus station. So I don't really think any of these sort of street ones will work at the moment. So let's just go with the usual bus and tram stop. And now we're gonna increase the size of this a good bit. We're also going to add in tram tracks, as I want to maybe get a main tram line running through the city as well. Alright, so this is going to be this station. We're going to wait to replace this until we have the rest of our infrastructure set up. And so I think we'll start by having this paused. And the easiest thing to do, I think, is to set up our tram network. And so this is going to run pretty much down our main road. So I guess we can come through and upgrade this all the way up through Houston. And then I think we'll come across this road to come into our station there, just so that we don't lose out on any efficiency by doing any unnecessary turns. And I think also what we want to do is upgrade our main road to be 4 lanes. So we'll come through and upgrade this. This will allow us to handle much more traffic on this road, since we'll now be running trams through all of this. And in order to upgrade this road, we'll actually have to relocate our headquarters. So we'll just move it over just a slight bit to give that road some space. But we can get that placed right about there. And now we should have no issues, hopefully, upgrading this. And then I guess we'll end it off here. I suppose we might need to add a turnaround for our tram tracks, so we'll just do something like that. And now that should be our tram line set up. We'll set up some stops here for that. But let's start off completely by scratch by deleting all of our bus stops, so we get sort of a fresh idea in our head on how we want to do this. And I think now's when we're probably going to start switching to lines instead of loops, as if we wanted to cover all of Houston with a bus loop, it'd be probably about 5 or 6 stations, and people would be taking unnecessary routes to get to their destinations. And so another road that I think we're going to upgrade to 4 lanes is this road, as this is our main road that cuts across the city. Hopefully this doesn't do too much damage to our existing buildings, but I think that should cover a lot of that traffic. And now it's largely just building the lines themselves. And so we'll get some tram stops down here. I'm not sure if we need 2 down here. We'll figure out if we need 2 or 1 once we fully set up this line. We'll get another one right about here on this side of the river. I'm debating on if we should place one here and then another one farther up this way, but those seem like those might overlap each other a good bit. So we might just come back and place this stop back where it was, as that should cover the majority of all of this. And I actually think maybe we get this stop much closer to this intersection so that when we add stops here and here, they're very close to each other, and so the transfer is very minimal. And so we have our north-south line through Houston. Let's figure out how we want to do this sort of east-west line. We'll get this stop placed here, and although it's not needed, I guess we can hold off on adding another stop all the way out there. But we'll get another one down this way. I believe that would be good enough for the spacing. And then there's two more lines I think I want to do. We'll have one that goes up and down this main road that sort of aligns with our train station. So we'll get one placed right about here, and then another one placed down at this intersection. And then the last one I think I want to cover is right here. So one there. We'll get one here, and we'll make sure that the buses won't be blocking the intersection. Although that looks like it makes two separate stops, so I'm not sure if I really want that. And then we'll get one last one all the way down here, which will cover this area once this fully gets filled in. And now hopefully this is quite a rework of Houston, so hopefully this works out. We will reroute our existing bus lines to get those working. And so this line will run from here. Actually, it looks like we accidentally started a new line, but this one will come here, and this will be this one that runs up and down this street. It'll come back, and I believe that's fine. We'll just change that so that it picks up here. And then, of course, we'll want to change these vehicles. I think we'll go with this Mac bus, as those will probably be our best bet. So we'll keep those. I'm not sure if we need all of those buses, but we'll start out with those for now and adjust later. And then our next line will be our line that cuts through like so. And everything here looks pretty good. We'll do the same thing with the vehicles. We'll replace those with the Mac vehicles. And then we have our last bus line that goes from here and then to this stop, and then all the way down to here, back up to there, and that one should be good. Alright, so now I think we're finally ready to let things start playing. We have all of our bus stops, or all of our bus lines out of this station. And the last thing we need to do is come over here and decide on what trams we want to run. Now these are going to probably be the most in-demand things because they're faster and carry a lot more people than our buses. So we'll take a look at our options here and decide on something. And so I think we'll get 4 of these trams. It's best in terms of top speed and pretty close in terms of capacity, but I think we'll be fine with our capacity. I think we'll bump that up to 6 vehicles, and we'll set this up on a new tram line that goes from here to this stop, up to our train station, and then of course we'll have it come back down to here, and then end up back down on Poplar Street. And now as we hit play, things are going to go a little crazy for a bit, but hopefully once the dust settles and our buses and everyone starts moving around again, we should have a pretty efficient and effective passenger network throughout Houston. And so here's a look at some of our new trams and buses as they come out of the road depot. Hopefully they don't get blocked too much by our truck traffic. We will have to keep an eye on that, but for now I think we'll let this run and we'll sort of come back and evaluate it later. Alright, so now we'll go through and do this to a few of our other cities. I know Salt Lake City comes to mind. We might also expand on some of the streets there. Portland, I don't think we necessarily need anything. We might want to just make sure our bus stops are covering everything, but because this isn't a grid, it'll be a little harder to tackle this, so we'll come back to this at another time. I think Allentown's okay for now. Once it gets a little bit bigger, we will come through and do some more on that. But I think Pittsburgh is one that we will probably look at. And then Tacoma, maybe. We might just do buses. We won't do anything with trams, but we will do some stuff with Tacoma to hopefully help out with that. And so now let's get on with tackling Salt Lake City. Some things I'm probably going to work on right away is filling in this space up here. So we'll connect these grids, extend this road. And then I think we might also think about how we're going to cap off this water area. Although we probably will have a bridge or two come across to this little island at some point. We'll clean up this area. And then it'll pretty much be the same as we did in Houston. We'll probably upgrade our main road cutting through the city in both directions to a large street. We'll get a tram line running up and down this one, and maybe even this way, depending on how this ends up looking once we're done with it. But then we'll get a few more supplementary bus lines, and that should be enough then to handle all of our demand here in Salt Lake City. Alright, now Salt Lake City now has a fully revamped passenger network. If we take a look here, you can sort of see the lines from here. So we have our main tram line running up this street. We have our secondary main bus route running across this way. And then we have some other bus routes running up and down on either side. And then another one in this upper area of the city near the train station, since this side is a little bit more developed than the area down by the water. And so it's going to be a little bit before we can see the effects of anything we've done. So let's just move on to our next city, which is going to be Pittsburgh. And then I think we'll end it off once we're done with Pittsburgh and see how everything is looking across the map. Alright, so now the last city that we're going to look at, like I just said, is Pittsburgh. And this one's going to be a bit more of a unique challenge, as it's not as forward and direct as the whole grid system that we had before. And I'm not sure if we'll get a tram line through here. Although there are possibilities. We'll take a look and maybe experiment with some type of tram line system. But we'll get to work on Pittsburgh, and I guess we'll just sort of see what comes out of this. So let's get into it, and we'll be back once we're done with all of this. Alright, so here's Pittsburgh with its new road network. Let's just take a quick look here at all the lines. So our main tram line cuts through our center street through the main city, comes across this bridge and drops off at the train station. We then have a big bus line that loops around sort of the riverside. And this, even though it's one line, sort of acts as two lines. So it covers all the needs on this side of the river and this side. And then we have a few bus lines just going across the river for that extra connection. And I believe that's all of the lines. It's obviously going to take a while for things to clear out and start to function fully. But I think now is a good time to take a look at everything that we've done in this video. Although it's not too much building, it's more of the cities, but we'll still take a look at some of the cooler details of what we've built. And then when we come back, we will make some minor quick adjustments to a few small things, and then talk about some future projects. Alright, so now that we're back, let's just take a look and see how Houston's doing since we've made our changes. It doesn't seem like the population's really changed. However, we don't have any more overloaded bus stations. It looks like we could use some help getting people out of the train station, but we'll worry about that another time. I think our trams are able to sort of handle it just fine. We can see our finances here on this line. It's not doing great, but as sort of a inner city passenger mover, I think it's just fine for what it is. And now a quick change I want to do is change this fuel boat that we have, and instead of having it as a boat, someone pointed out in the comments that it's just much simpler to use a truck. And so the one minor thing I want to change is switching this boat to a truck. This was pointed out by some people in the comments, and I know I brought that up initially when we set up this line. I opted for a boat because I guess I overassumed how much fuel would be coming in. I mean, we only have 31 fuel, and that's not even really coming in that often by this train. So I suppose it does make sense that we do a truck. It's just a matter of where we want to bring that in from. So we can either bring this road out and bridge across the river, or we could use this road here. But I think I'm more inclined to use this road as it's a fair distance farther down, but it gives a more direct connection into the city, which I think is something we might value a little more once Portland gets larger. So we'll just get this in here. I think this bridge looks fine. And then from here, it's just a matter of extending the road outward. So we'll just continue to drag this road along here, and then eventually we'll just have it connect straight into this road. And now we don't have a truck stop around here, so we'll quickly just plop one in here. I suppose this one's fine. It doesn't need to be anything too big just yet, so whatever this is will pretty much work out for the small amount of fuel that will be coming in and out of here. Alright, so now that we have this station here, we can manage this line, and we'll just completely get rid of it. I guess we have to sell the vehicle first, so we'll sell this, manage the line, and fully delete that. And then from here, we can reroute this fuel line, and instead of going to Portland Central, it'll just come out here, and we'll make sure this is loaded up properly. And then we'll get just a few more vehicles to cover back up the rate that we were working at before. Alright, so now let's evaluate everything that we've done in this video. So starting off with our Houston to Tacoma line, this has by far been a standout as a very good project for us. You can see just how much money it's beginning to make, especially since we've added that second train. It looks like in Tacoma there's a good amount of people waiting. In Houston there's also a good amount of people waiting. And I believe these trains are usually traveling close to full in both directions. And then let's take a look at our two new Pittsburgh lines. So we have our Lincoln to Pittsburgh. This one, we can see the demand slowly building up, and it's finally made us money in this most recent period. I believe Pittsburgh's good, but I want to see what the demand on the Lincoln side of it is. We can see we have 31 people waiting. Where is this train? So yeah, I'm sure this train is only going to get better as it continues to do more trips. And then this is our Pittsburgh to Tacoma line, which much similar thing, only just recently has begun to earn money. And I think a lot of it has to do with us reworking Pittsburgh's bus network. So now it's a lot easier for people to go in and out of that train station. And so speaking of our passenger networks, we already looked at Houston. Everything seems to be doing well here. If not, it's a little bit overkill in some areas, but we'll come through in a later video and thin that out if we need to. And then coming over to Salt Lake City, things are doing pretty well here. Let's see, it looks like it's still recovering from all of our changes, but this station looks to be a lot more full than it used to be. So I think getting more trains or updated trains on this passenger line is severely needed now at this point. But again, everything looks pretty good here. Even our main station is largely empty, but I think this is a pretty good turnout in Salt Lake City. Hopefully it rebounds much faster than it was before. And then lastly we have Pittsburgh, which of course is our most recent update, so we're probably not going to see anything reflected just yet on that. But I think looking here, things are doing pretty well. It looks like our trams are sort of full for the most part. I think things are still working out around the city, as it again was fairly recent. But I think overall, everything that we've done here is a success. Now we just have to replicate these same passenger networks across some of our other cities. And so as for future projects, again, as we wanted to do in this video, connect Pittsburgh to Roswell, and then maybe a line from Roswell to Lincoln. And then we will want to upgrade this main line from Houston to Salt Lake City to Portland, upgrade those trains, and maybe even start to think about upgrading the tracks through there to accommodate more trains, faster trains, and allow passing. And then I think most of the cities on the map are requesting 4 or 5 resources, so I think now we can start to think about locations for some hubs on the map. So for example, I think a cargo hub somewhere here will be pretty good, as it will be pretty easy to serve Lincoln, Roswell, Pittsburgh, maybe even Tacoma. We could probably share some of these rail line connections. So that's a pretty good potential location for this side of the map. And then maybe somewhere in this area along the water for this end of the map. That'll be pretty good, as we have a fair amount of resources. We have fuel, we have tools, we have food. So we can start grouping those together and sending those 3 resources out to every city, at least over on this end, so that those cities can share those resources. We'll just have to think about how we want to get the other resources that we aren't building yet over here. And same with the other side. I believe we have machines, we have food from Pittsburgh, we have tools, and then we have construction materials all the way out here. So bringing all those into one location and then just sending them out on a few trains to each city would probably start to work out very well in our favor, instead of all these individual lines serving each single city. And so with that, that's going to be all for this video. So if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. If you have any suggestions or feedback, leave a comment below. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.